One afternoon, James and Edward were at the washdown. Edward was covered in slate dust and he felt stuffed up. James wanted it to be his turn and was impatient. Suddenly, Edward sneezed. Achoo! Oh, sorry, said Edward, and went on to being cleaned. James was cross and wanted to get back at Edward. Later, Edward was taking a freight train down his branch line. The trucks giggled and sang. Edward didn't mind. Up ahead was a bumpy piece of track he and Boko called Trickety Track. The workmen were soon going to come mend it, but Thomas and Duck's branch lines were taking a long time to repair. As Edward went over the bumpy track, "Ouch!" he cried. The trucks laughed. "Trickety Track, don't look back! Trickety Track, don't look back!" they sang. Edward laughed. He thought it was silly. Soon Edward arrived at Knapford Station. Duck, Donald, and Gordon were there. The trucks were still singing. "What's this Trickety Track?" asked Gordon. Edward chuckled. "Me and Boko call the bumpiest part of our line Trickety Track," he said. James puffed in on his way to the docks. "We have to be careful on it, or we might have an accident," continued Edward. James laughed rudely at Edward. "Can't even handle a bumpy piece of track?" he laughed. "You're older than I thought." And James puffed away to the docks. The other engines thought James was being very rude. "He'll regret it," Edward said calmly. Sir Topham Hatt walked up. "Edward, Donald is blocked by some stray cattle, and the workmen need to get to his branch line to repair a part of it. Get some coaches and collect the workmen and take them to Duck's branch line. Douglas will take them from there." "Yes, sir," replied Edward. "But what about my goods train?" "We'll find another engine to do it," Sir Topham Hatt said. So Edward chuffed away to collect his coaches. James was at the docks shunting. He was working as hard as he could. He shunted empty trucks to be loaded by cranes. He organized the cars and sidings for Percy and Boko's trains. James had fun. He shunted coal trucks, boxcars, full flatbeds, milk tankers, and even a salt wagon. James was pleased, but not for long. Sir Topham Hatt drove up. Sir Topham Hatt told James that he needed him to take Edward's goods train. James was unhappy, but did it anyway. James found the goods train at Knapford Station. He was coupled up and pulled the train out of the station. James was surprised the trucks were quiet and not troublesome. What James didn't know was that the trucks wanted to play a trick on James at Trickety Track. James rolled over the junction to Edward's branch line. The trucks snickered quietly. James kept puffing. In the distance was Trickety Track. James was unaware of it. The cars lunged forward, bumping James off the bumpy track.
Ouch!
James was derailed and now in trouble. Soon enough, though, Boko arrived with the breakdown train. "Got yourself in a bit of a mess, eh, James?" said Boko. "Don't worry, we'll get you out and going again." The cars were soon removed, and James was put back on the rails. Bill and Ben then pushed James to the shed. James was glad when they left. That night, no one mentioned Trickety Track or being derailed. James thought all the other engines didn't know about his accident. However, Edward gave James a subtle wink. James knew exactly what Edward meant, and James stayed silent for the rest of the night. Next time on Thomas and Friends. Bill and Ben have always worked with trucks. But when help is needed on the main line, will Bill be able to handle the coaches? Find out next time in Bill and the Coaches.